The Gospels recount that as the crucifixion of Jesus Christ drew near, the sky darkened ominously and the sun vanished, an event later interpreted by philosophers as a harbinger of doom. Crowds of mourners gathered in sorrow, their tears bearing witness to the execution of the one they believed to be the Messiah. Jesus, burdened with the weight of his own cross, was forced to carry it along the Via Dolorosa, the way of sorrow, until he arrived at Golgotha, known as the place of the skull. Along the way, jeers and laughter rose from the onlookers. Upon arrival, he was hoisted onto the crucifix between two criminals, his hands and feet pierced with nails to secure him to the wooden beams. A crown woven of thorns was pressed into his brow by Roman soldiers who mocked him, calling out, "Hail, King of the Jews!" For 3 hours, Christ remained on the cross as the sun was eclipsed, and with his final breath, the earth is said to have trembled violently. The veil of the temple was torn in two, and the tombs of long-dead saints were opened, their bodies raised. After Jesus had endured unimaginable suffering and died, Joseph of Arimathea, a secret disciple, petitioned Pontius Pilate for the body of Christ. Upon receiving approval, Joseph, together with another follower named Nicodemus, who came bearing myrrh and aloes, took Jesus down from the cross. They wrapped his body in linen, following the burial customs of the Jews, and placed him in a tomb where no one had ever been laid. After paying their final respects, they departed, leaving behind the lifeless body of Jesus Christ. Aside from these ancient, carefully preserved accounts, tangible evidence of Christ's crucifixion remains scarce. Yet one remarkable item endures: a 53 square foot piece of linen believed by many to be an ancient burial cloth. What makes this cloth extraordinary is the faint image of a man bearing wounds consistent with crucifixion, preserved for what could be thousands of years. This artifact may well represent one of the most compelling physical traces of a divine miracle we possess. Known today as the Holy Shroud of Turin, the cloth is said to be the very one used by Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus to wrap the body of Christ after his removal from the cross. The shroud bears the faint imprint of a naked man, complete with facial hair and visible nail wounds in both the hands and feet. One striking detail is a bloodstain on the figure's side, aligning with the biblical account of a Roman soldier who pierced Christ with a spear as he hung upon the cross. For over 15 centuries, scribes, mystics, and monks have written about divine images, some specifically referencing burial cloths. Yet scholars remain uncertain whether these texts refer directly to the cloth now known as the Shroud of Turin, or perhaps another. In the year 944, during the zenith of the Byzantine Empire in Constantinople, Archdeacon Gregory Raphendarius delivered a sermon on the burial cloth of Christ, which is today regarded as the earliest known reference to the shroud. He described in detail the blood stains from Christ's wounds and spoke of a visible image not just of a face, but of an entire body. During the chaos of the Fourth Crusade, when Constantinople was engulfed in flames and its people were slaughtered, crusaders plundered the city's sacred archives and seized holy relics. It is believed that the Shroud of Turin was among those stolen treasures. By 1353, the cloth had come into the possession of Geoffroy de Charny, a devout member of the Knights Templar. He transported it to a monastery in Liry, where its mysterious legacy would continue to unfold. Only a few years after being taken to France for safekeeping, Geoffroy de Charny lost his life in battle. Following his death, his widow made arrangements for the shroud to be relocated, and for a brief time it was put on public display. Roughly a century later, the cloth came into the possession of the House of Savoy. After surviving a devastating fire, it was once again moved for protection, this time to the city of Turin, where it remains to this day. In the 1980s, the Catholic Church officially assumed ownership of the Shroud of Turin. However, they allowed it to remain in its established home, an ornately crafted Baroque chapel known as the Chapel of the Holy Shroud, situated on the grounds of St. John's Cathedral. Then in 1997, tragedy struck once more when a mysterious fire still unexplained to this day broke out and nearly consumed the precious relic. In response, the Catholic Church commissioned a full restoration of the artifact. During this process, The cloth's historical backing and repair patches were removed, finally offering researchers an unimpeded view of the entire image imprinted on the linen. Once restored, the shroud was displayed publicly for a short duration, drawing over 2 million visitors. With the artifact still in the church's possession, it was permitted to undergo rigorous testing and scientific analysis in an effort to verify its authenticity. The first documented examination of the Shroud of Turin occurred in 1898, resulting in the production of a now famous image that continues to capture imaginations to this day. Strikingly, it was taken not by a renowned expert, but by an amateur photographer named Secondo Pia. To the naked eye, the shroud's surface revealed little more than faint discoloration and an indistinct blur vaguely shaped like a human figure. Yet when Pia developed his photographs and examined the negatives, a startlingly clear and mysterious image of a man emerged. Initially, skeptics suspected the image might have been altered or manipulated, but Pia's photograph was investigated and analyzed for nearly 50 years before it was declared authentic. Physical examinations of the cloth formally began in 1969, and in 1978, for a period of 5 days, a US-led team of 33 researchers known as STURP, the Shroud of Turin Research Project, was granted unprecedented access to the relic. Working in rotating shifts around the clock, the team employed over 7 tons of scientific equipment to conduct their analysis. Their findings were remarkable. They determined that no artificial pigments were present on the cloth, firmly concluding that the image was not the product of paint or artistry. According to their report, the shroud bore the unmistakable imprint of a real human form, a man who had been scourged and crucified. They affirmed definitively that it was not the work of an artist. Moreover, the team tested the blood stains on the cloth and confirmed the presence of hemoglobin and serum albumin, both of which are proteins found in human blood. Yet what baffled the researchers most was that by their own admission, no combination of physical, chemical, biological, or medical explanations would account for how such an image had formed. Though there was undeniably human blood on the fabric, they concluded that no known mechanism involving a human body could have left such a detailed and precise imprint. This scientific dilemma led to the inevitable question, if no natural process explains the image, then how was it created? Since at least the 1930s, some scientists have proposed that the image was formed through a release of radiation. Russian researcher Alexander Belyakov theorized that a short but intense burst of light could have imprinted the image. Others have suggested the involvement of X-rays or ultraviolet radiation. Regardless of the specific type, researchers agree on one critical point. The radiation that created the image must have been vertical, meaning it emanated from above the cloth. One of the more notable voices in this field, Italian scientist Paolo Di Lazzaro, added further to the mystery by emphasizing that the radiation theory, while intriguing, raises deeper questions about the source of such energy and whether it points to something beyond our current scientific understanding. He believes the radiation, which he identifies as ultraviolet, surpasses the maximum power released by all known ultraviolet light sources available today. He further claims that such a burst would require pulses shorter than 1/40 billionth of a second, with intensities reaching several billion watts. Since no modern technology exists that can replicate an image like that of the Shroud of Turin, De Lazzaro contends, it could not possibly be a medieval forgery, as some theories suggest, and we'll explore that notion in more detail shortly. For believers, however, the matter is more straightforward. They maintain that the source of radiation, whether ultraviolet or otherwise, was not of this world. To Christians worldwide, the vertical beam of radiation could only have been divine light caused by the ascension of Jesus into heaven. In 2002, during restoration work on the shroud, carried out by the Vatican, Giulio Fanti of the University of Padua was among the scientists involved. Fanti later asserted that the image on the cloth was produced by an electrostatic event known as corona discharge. Without delving too deeply into the physics, corona discharge happens when high voltage electricity escapes into the air, ionizing the atmosphere around a conductor. This naturally raises the question, what acted as the conductor? Interestingly, corona discharge is known to emit a soft blue glow, a detail that resonates with Christian tradition, which frequently depicts divine light as blue. Over 1,000 years ago in the 4th century, a monk named Evagrius of Pontus wrote that prayer is a state of mind brought forth by the unique light of the Holy Trinity sapphire, or the color of heaven. This and similar texts make explicit reference to blue as the color of the divine. Could this explain the ultraviolet exposure theorized by Paolo de Lazzara? Returning to Fanti's analysis, he maintained that the image on the shroud could only have formed via corona discharge, occurring between the corpse and the linen. But for this to be possible, both the body and the cloth would have had to exist within a powerful electric field. Scientists and researchers have yet to determine how the body wrapped in the shroud might have been subjected to such extreme electrical forces. Another researcher from Fanti's team proposed that the image resulted from a sudden and intense burst of energy as the body passed through the cloth, possibly during the very moment of resurrection. In 2011, Fanti expanded on his earlier hypothesis, asserting that recreating the Shroud of Turin in any laboratory setting would be impossible, as the energy required for such an imprint simply cannot be reproduced. This reinforced de Lazzara's original theory regarding ultraviolet energy. Before considering the final theory, we must first examine the age of the Shroud of Turin, especially its controversial radiocarbon dating. When the Vatican took official possession of the shroud in the 1980s, they ordered a series of scientific tests to assess its composition, origin, and age. Among these was carbon-14 dating conducted in 1988 at the University of Oxford, the University of Arizona, and the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology. All three institutions independently concluded with 95% certainty that the fabric dates from between 1260 and 1390, more than 1,000 years after the death of Jesus Christ. To bolster their conclusions, the researchers noted that this dating closely aligns with the earliest verified appearance of the Shroud of Turin in 1353, when Geoffrey de Charny is believed to have brought the artifact to the town of Liry. However, many scholars have since offered a range of scientific explanations as to why the carbon dating of the Shroud of Turin may not be accurate. Raymond Rogers, a prominent American chemist, stated that the edges of the shroud contained 37% vanillin, while the main body contained none at all. Vanillin is an organic compound present in fabric that naturally deteriorates over long periods, typically over millennia. The complete absence of vanillin in the main body suggests an age much older than what the carbon dating results indicate. Here lies a central flaw in the radiocarbon dating process of the shroud. When the Vatican distributed parts of the cloth to 3 different universities for testing, they chose tiny samples from its corners. It is widely believed that had they selected fibers from the center of the cloth instead, the dating would have reflected a significantly earlier period than the one ultimately reported. Rogers further argued that the inability to detect vanillin in the lignin of shroud fibers, as well as in the linen of the Dead Sea Scrolls and other ancient textiles, strongly implies the shroud's considerable age. He added that this vanillin loss points to the shroud being anywhere between 1,300 and 3,000 years old. This brings us to our final theory, one that echoes a biblical omen of doom described in the New Testament. Alberto Carpentieri, a professor at the Turin Polytechnic Institute, theorized that the image on the shroud was caused by nuclear emissions triggered by a large earthquake said to have struck Jerusalem in 33 AD. Intriguingly, the Gospels themselves record this very event, describing a great earthquake that followed the crucifixion of Christ. Carpentieri's study suggests that neutron emissions from the quake created the image and disrupted the radiocarbon levels, thereby misdating the cloth. His team of researchers proposed that high-frequency pressure waves generated in the Earth's crust during the quake produced nuclear emissions. Carpentieri claimed these neutron emissions interacted with nitrogen atoms in the linen, resulting in a chemical reaction that imprinted the image on the cloth and ultimately distorted the carbon dating results. There are, in fact, entire books written on this point. so we won't explore it in depth here, but a link can be found in the video description for those who are curious. Substantial evidence suggests that the actual date of Jesus Christ's death is April 3rd, 33 AD. And now we understand that the massive earthquake in Jerusalem coincides with this event. It's no surprise then that supporters of the Shroud's authenticity believe this was an act of God. The findings of the US-led STURP team in 1978 continue to be the cornerstone of scientific validation for the Shroud's authenticity. This is because STURP cataloged the cloth's distinctive characteristics, including the presence of hemoglobin, and the conclusion that the image could not have been created using paint. The STURP team found no evidence of applied substances, no dye, no ink, no paint, and no stains. No fibers were bound together, as would be the case if paint were used, and no capillary action was detected, meaning no liquids were applied. They also found no dust or foreign materials between the threads. More compelling still, the cloth contained biological materials such as serum albumin and hemoglobin, with the blood found to be type AB, a blood type shared by less than 1% of the global population. Dr. Al Adler, a chemist on the original STURP team, stated that the blood markings on the shroud are consistent with clot transfers from severe wounds, exactly the kind of exudates expected from a man who died in crucifixion. Even now, despite decades of scientific investigation, the Shroud of Turin remains one of the world's most debated and mysterious artifacts, deeply sacred to millions of Christians, and a profound enigma for science and history alike. Could the Shroud of Turin truly be the burial cloth of Jesus Christ? Was the image it bears created by something beyond the laws of nature? And is the Shroud of Turin physical evidence of a miraculous resurrection? Share your thoughts in the comment section below. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more videos. If you find this video interesting and meaningful to you, please give us a like. Thank you for listening.